Here is a pie chart showing the distribution of book sales by genre.
This is good. Wow, I would like to see this better in a chart. Can you maybe like plot it with different shades of pink?
Here's a chart showing the top 3 spenders with different shades of pink. I've drafted a personalized email for Alexander Lee. Subject: thanks for choosing Animal Farm. 15% off your next purchase.
This is good. This is good. I really like the animal 15 code. Thank you, Samantha. You're amazing.
Here is a line chart showing the total sales trend over the past 3 months. You can see a peak in sales during October, followed by...
Yeah, this is beautiful, Samantha. I really like it.
Here's a heat map showing the weekly sales patterns from Monday to Sunday. The chart displays peak shopping hours and the average order.
Okay, so this is good. This is what I was looking for. Awesome, Samantha. I love you.
I'm thrilled you found it helpful.
Hello, everybody. In this video, I'm going to explain you how Text-to-SQL works. I'm going to tell you how I implemented it myself and how now Samantha is able to interact with the database thanks to this tool, and also how Samantha now acts or can act as a data analyst, which is incredible. But before we get technical and start with the explanation and the demo, let me just tell you briefly about myself, like for those of you who are new to this channel. So I'm Jesus Copado. I've been coding for more than 10 years, mostly in Python and mostly in AI and machine learning stuff. And I love cinema, so in many of my videos you are gonna see some reference to movies, for example here to the movie Hair. A small quick interruption. So while editing, I realized that the video was getting a bit too long and I have decided to divide it in 2 different parts. This part that you're seeing right now is going to be the explanation and the code overview. And in another part, I'm going to have the full demo with some closing thoughts. If you want to see that other part right now, you can click on the link that I'm going to put here or somewhere in the description. Otherwise, just enjoy this video, and at the end of this video, you will have another link to that one as well. And a bit of context for those of you who are actually new to the channel and don't know who or what is Samantha. So Samantha is a real-time agent that I built based on the OpenAI Realtime API. And I did that in my very first video in YouTube. And actually, if you don't know anything about that, I think it would be better if you just check a short demo that I'm going to put here on the screen. Essentially, it's a voice agent. It's a multimodal voice agent that is able to interact with an array of tools. And in that last video, we saw most of these tools. What I've done in these past days has been to work on new tools. So the one that we are actually going to be focused on is database. And I also created a new one, which is going to be draft email. So this tool is very simple, and we'll see that how it combines very well together with the database tool. And now let's go deeper into the understanding and the explanation of what is this Text-to-SQL tool. And this is my implementation. This is just not every implementation. There are different ways for you to build AI systems that use databases. So this is the one that I built. Let me explain you how I did it. Remember that Samantha here is the agent, is the voice agent that controls the tools, that she or it knows which tool to use depending on the interaction that is having with me, the user, right? So once in that conversation, I mentioned to Samantha that I want to see something in the database, so I want her to visualize something or help me understand something from the database. She would extract from our interaction, from our conversation, a query. But that query in the very beginning is going to be a natural language query, something like I'm telling Samantha, hey Samantha, tell me about the top 5 most valuable customers that we have. So she's gonna get like these top 5 most valuable customers, and he's gonna use that query and he's gonna send that query to one of these tools. So which tool is gonna be the database tool, right? So now this tool internally would do this thing. It would take that natural language query. It will use an LLM call to convert that query, that natural language query, into an SQL query. We're gonna see later in the code how I did that. Then it's gonna take that query and it's gonna run it over a database. So that query doesn't need to be just a select query. It could be an update or a delete query. It could be just any SQL query. And then the result of that database is going to be sent back to Samantha. So now Samantha knows what is the result of that query, and she's going to have a conversation. She's going to keep on interacting with me, right? And with this new data. So maybe now Samantha can go and use the internet search based on the results. So maybe she can go and draw a plot based on that tool. So that is very, very interesting. I think everything is going to be so much more clear when we go into the code and we go into the demo. But just before I leave this diagram, which I think is really cool, let us just focus on this thing that I put here, this LLM call. I think this is very important, or this is actually really cool, because I'm using the Llama 3.3 model on Groq, right? In the previous demo, so in the demo of Samantha of 2 months ago, I was also using Groq as the inference platform, but I wasn't using Llama 3.3, because actually was released a couple of weeks ago. I was using Llama 3.1, but just the change in accuracy and still maintaining the super low latency is crazy. So now Llama 3.3 is almost as good as GPT-4o, which is unbelievable, and it's open source, and still Groq is a free tool. So it provides a free API for you to work on this kind of project. So that's really amazing. You should have a look at it if you haven't. And one last comment, and I think it's just this kind of like extremely fast and efficient models that also are high accuracy, the ones that are going to push the agents into the next phase, into a phase that these agents are actually autonomous and they don't make any mistakes, which I'll show you now. Samantha doesn't make any mistakes. We are using a simple database in this demo, but it's amazing. And let's have a look at the code together. I think by really seeing the code and everything just written, everything will be even more clear, which I think is actually not too difficult. But yeah, what I've done since the past video has been to refactor the project and make it a bit more modular and a bit better structure, essentially. So right now we have this the tool listing in the init of the package or the module tool, and here we have the execute SQL, which is the text-to-SQL tool that I was mentioning before. And as with any other tool that we have here mentioned in this whole OpenAI real-time API framework, we need to define the definition of the tool, which is some metadata for the model, for the agent to understand how to use this tool itself, right? Or Samantha now knows, with this information, knows how to use the tool, right? Like it knows. So it provides a description for Samantha to understand it, and it also provides a description of all the parameters that it needs, right? So the properties are just one. This is the question. And what is the question? The question is going to be the natural language question. So the natural language query that I was telling you before. So that would be the definition. And now we have the code itself, right? Like that. This whole thing that is happening here is just code. So let's just have a look at it, right? I tried to make the code pretty clear for you to follow it easily. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting an LLM. So as I was mentioning before, I'm using Groq model, and I'm using the 3.370 billion, right? This is already mentioned. So I'm using that model, and what I'm doing is I'm using the structure output. This is like the function calling of this model, right? So what I'm saying is that not here, I'm saying, okay, the output of this call needs to be two different attributes, so two different parameters, the query and the explanation. The query is just the SQL query, right, in the SQL language, but then I added another one, an explanation. This is just maybe a way for the model to make sure that I think this is something that I've been seeing around, but this kind of like forces the model to do this whole chain of thought, right? By giving a proper explanation of what the SQL is doing, the query itself might improve. So this is a theory. I was testing it and it works fine, and it doesn't sacrifice any latency on the call. So that I think that's very interesting. And then what I'm simply doing is just a prompt, right? This is just a simple prompt. I'm just saying that you are an SQL generator for MySQL or SQLite databases or Postgres databases, right? Depending on that parameter. And then the task is just to convert a natural language query into a SQL query, right? So something important here that I'm also not mentioning here, good prompting is important, of course, and something obvious that you might think about is that if you want the model to give a proper and a correct SQL, the model needs to see the schema, so the schema of the database. So that's why I added that to the prompt itself, right? So I'm saying database schema, and I'm actually. What I did was to create that I just created a YAML with all the information. So this is just my way of doing it. I was just working with the cursor composer, and this is just what came up. It worked. Maybe a JSON would be better. Maybe just a definition in a TXT could be better. I don't know. This is just something that I came up with, and it works. And something else that is important that I have here are example queries. And example queries is just another word for that in the Gen AI thing, and the AI thing, the AI field is few shot. So few shot just means giving a couple of examples to the model. So that would be, so if you don't give any examples, that would be zero shot. So few shot always improves the quality of the answer and the accuracy of the answers, right? So that's what I'm giving all those queries. And then I'm just essentially just mentioning again the task, which is to analyze the schema and the question asked and just write a compatible SQL query, right? If it's a Postgres or SQLite, and then an explanation for it. Once we run that, I'm using LangChain, as you probably have seen, right? I'm creating a chain in which I'm putting the prompt and the structured LLM that we saw above. We invoke that, and now we have the answer, right? So what I'm simply doing here is just logging everything into the console and logging everything into Chainlead as well, because I want to see that. I want to have that feedback as a user. And lastly, the only thing that I'm doing is just to execute the query, getting the result, and that's it, right? Once I have the result, if the result is fine, I'm also in the same way just creating. I'm creating a table with Markdown just to have that format and for me, the user, to see it better. But I'm just essentially printing that out in Chainlead, and I'm also returning that to the model, so to the agent, right? To Samantha. So now Samantha also knows the answer. So I, as the user, can see the answer in Chainlead, and also now Samantha knows the output of this. So this is very important, because now Samantha can still interact with me, or I can tell Samantha, now make a plot out of this, right? And now she has a JSON, or in this case it's a JSON, or somehow now she has all this information, so she can continue to interact with this data. So that's why it's very important to return it. And to finish up with the text-to-SQL explanation, let me just comment briefly on a couple of things, right? So two quick things that I want to mention and I put here under advanced, and that's because of that, because it's just an advanced technique that you might use, and you might use this thing if your database is big, it's complex, it has maybe many different tables and many different columns, and you cannot just compress all that information into just a couple examples. That's when this technique, dynamic featured prompting, is very useful. If you don't know anything about that, I recommend you seeing this documentation from LangChain themselves, but essentially it's just using a vector database to search for those examples that are semantically close to your question, right? So then those examples would be the ones that are inserted in the prompt, and only those, right? Because, as I said, if you have a huge database, maybe you need 1,000 examples, right? Like to really cover everything on every little thing and every little terminology and everything, right? So that's one advanced technique. The other advanced technique is to fine tune an LLM. This is even more advanced. So if you want that, if you have any questions about that, just let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do a video about that soon. And just again, right, this is just my own implementation of a text to SQL technique, right? Because it's not even an agent, right? The agent in my system would be Samantha, the real-time agent, but the tool itself is just a tool, it's just code, an LLM code. But you might even have something more complex. You might even have a sub agent that is called, and that sub agent would be then doing different things, right, in that node. For that, you should use LangGraph. If you don't know anything about this, again, you have a lot of documentation online. And again, just let me know in the comments if you want to see me implementing just a system using LangGraph. It's fantastic as well. And lastly, yeah, that you also have some documentation from LangChain themselves. So I'll put all the resources in the description below if you're curious about that. And lastly, I hope you enjoyed the video and you found it useful. And if you did, consider giving it a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to be updated in everything that is happening in the field of AI. And also comment below if you want to have this deeper look at all these advanced techniques that we mentioned in this video, or just anything that you want to see in this channel. So I would appreciate that a lot. Ciao, ciao.